You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 544, our breakdown of the latest episodes from Season 3 of The Bad Batch, Infiltration and Extraction, two episodes that I was looking forward to personally because they were back-to-back, and I think we've gotten the best episodes from this series in the back-to-back episodes, and they delivered. Like, these are, as the kids say, banger episodes once again, and a lot of Clone Wars stuff, which I think made this man happy, seeing all the clones back. But Jonesy's with us tonight. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, I agree with you. We were talking earlier with someone, and they asked, why did we have to have both these back to back? Did it make sense? Should we have, had a cliffhanger on episode 6 and then waited next week for episode 7? But I like it when these tie together and we get to get that immediate resolution. And there's probably other reasons why we're cramming episodes in a little bit here, but yeah. I like that we got that continuity though. So it was really cool to kind of get it back to back and get the arc kind of done,
Yeah. And it's consistent with the series. We've had a number of episodes now. I was looking back. They did this as far back as season 1, of course, with the opening. But it's nice having these kind of little mini episodes and not having to wait. At the same time, we do have the week-to-week stuff too, which is great because it allows for a lot of discussion and discourse and debate to happen. So, but for this one, it was kind of self-contained, and I love the fact that we didn't have to wait to get more answers there.
Yeah, but and who we don't have to wait for getting answers for every single week, Albert? Gosh, our mighty Patreon members. So, huge thanks to all of our Patreon members for supporting the show, especially our now part of the tribe members: Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, our top tier: Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Daz. If you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. We are releasing content every Sunday evening. The live stream is at 10 p.m. Central Time, center of the universe, according to Albert. So every Sunday night we are doing a Bad Batch breakdown or some sort of Patreon content to, give something back to all of y'all. And if you'd like to watch it live, this is the way tier and above is the way to do that. And the audio is usually available the next day or so after that, if you'd like to listen to it. But if you want to see our smiling faces and participate in the chat, we would love to have you. cantinacast.com/Patreon. If you are listening to this, thanks for the download on the podcast. If you'd like to watch this, it's free for everybody on YouTube, cantinacast.com/YouTube. And you can come out and join all of these amazing people in the chat already. Kathy, Qui-Gon J, Sky, My Star Wars Guys, Steph, One Up versus CPU, and Skywalker's Academy. Dale, good to see you out there. And all those in the background, we see you as well. So please come by, say hi, join in the chat, leave us your comments, leave us your information. And if you're watching this after the fact, please do like the video, subscribe if you're not already, and leave us a comment about what your favorite moments of this week's episodes were. We'd love to hear it, and we try to respond to all of them.
Yep. Also, programming notes, Lauren has just released her breakdown, or at least her breakdown review of Defy the Storm, which is the latest novel from Phase 3 of the High Republic. Go check that out. We've got some coverage. Well, I don't know if we'll have coverage coming. I think she's pretty much covered it. But nonetheless,
she does a very thorough job. She's great.
Yeah. And there's like a small snippet at the beginning. If you don't, you're spoiler adverse, then you can watch that part. And then if you've already read it or really don't care or just kind of want to know what happens, she'll give you another like 25 minutes of a full breakdown and details on exactly what just happens in that book. This week, as Jonesy mentioned, we've got a Patreon show coming Sunday night. That'll be about 10 p.m. Central. And starting at 9 p.m. Central, we will be back here with the Way Station, which we didn't get to have 2 weeks ago. So we've got a month worth of news, and I'm going to have to filter some stuff out, which is fine because some of this stuff really wasn't really that newsworthy compared to the other things that are going on. But we'll talk Patty Jenkins because she's back in the news again, as some of us already know. But we've also got, so Ed will be with me on that one. And we've got Fred coming back. So I guess you guys remember Fred, he did a couple shows with us. He stepped in and he's going to be back. So we're going to probably two-man that going forward, which should be a lot of fun. And I know it's going to be crazy to get Fred and Ed together and see what that dynamic's like. But looking forward to it, and should be a lot of fun. So please join us at 9 p.m. this Sunday for Waystation, all Star Wars news, rumors, gossip, and anything else in between.
Yeah, before we get started, of course, we lost Michael Culver just this past week in the last few days here. He was Captain Nita. So sad to hear the passing of yet another Star Wars legend in our canon from the movies. And so heart goes out to him and his family. And may he rest in peace.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, let's get started on our breakdown because we've got 2 episodes to talk about. And we'll start with, of course, with Infiltration. I guess, why don't you give me, why don't we kind of just give us our overall thoughts on both of them as you see?
Yeah, I mean, this season's kind of turning into a Crosshair season. And so we get little tidbits of Crosshair. He's a really tough character to really dive into all at once because he doesn't want to be dove into, whatever the right word is, so much. He doesn't want the attention. He doesn't want to share. He doesn't want to talk, engage with others. And when his back's against the wall, but it's kind of cool to be able to see some of this starting to come out. And I like that we're getting these, coming back to some of the relationships. It was great to see Hauser again, but of course them coming together and that tension and where Hauser kind of goes on that journey. It's really cool to see Crosshair getting a bit of this attention. We've touched on most of the other, Bad Batch characters in some form or fashion, some a little bit more than others. So it's good that Crosshair is getting this, this kind of final season is kind of his arc in many ways, I think. But also this was a really action-packed episode. I mean, this had a lot going for it. It was a very dark episode. We've talked about this before with this series that sometimes...
You mean the lighting itself?
The lighting, yeah. Okay, it was just, it was always in the dark. It was very difficult. When something brilliant, like when an explosion happens in the background, it looks amazing. But a lot of the other times you have to really turn the lights off to really get to really appreciate all of the detail that's, not getting lost in the shadows if you're, have a well-lit room or anything. But I kind of watched that and I was like, man, Albert's going to talk about it being dark, so I'm going to beat him to it this time. But overall, I mean, these are enjoyable episodes, and I like where we're going, and it's cool to see Rex and the boys. And like you said, it was a Clone Wars reunion. I actually thought Commander Greer was long gone, so it was surprising to see him there temporarily. But but it was really cool to see some of the other common names come about, and of course, with Wolf showing up, that was kind of a nice geek out moment and a little unresolved, ending there. So I'm curious to see where that goes too. But what about you? What were your initial takeaways from it?
Well, I think thematically touching on, loyalty and trust, which were kind of prevalent through both of these episodes, specifically, of course, the loyalty and the trust that we saw with Hauser and with Crosshair. I thought that was great. And that little kind of brilliant exchange about, him getting back, or at least trying to have a last say or some words with him, given what had happened last time they met. That was interesting. But then, we get kind of see almost another dimension of loyalty coming from Wolf, where he is loyal to the Empire because he's still a soldier at heart. And, he's got a whole history here that we probably don't have time to get into with, how loyal he was to the Republic. Even like in, Star Wars Rebels, even then he's the one that turned him over, right? He turned over our Rebels crew because he was more loyal to his clones, and he didn't want anything to happen to them, and was worried that if the Empire found out they were there, they'd be captured and that sort of thing. So he's got an interesting dynamic, but just kind of thematically, just kind of touching on that through both of the episodes, I thought was really great. It was good to see Teth again. I mean, maybe official confirmation now that was Teth, where kind of all this started way back in the day. They already mentioned the kind of two-parter episodes and how much I like those. We got a Wilhelm scream. Just throwing that out there. It's kind of, I know some people already caught it, some people have not. It wasn't as in your face as it normally is. It was kind of in the background subtly as I think one of the stormtroopers was flying off or whatever it was. I can't remember who it was that did it.
Fell out of the ship, I think. There were two that fell out of the ship,
Yep. But then really, I guess the one piece that I love the most out of here was definitely the relationship between Crosshair and Omega. I don't know, like this episode kind of put doubt in my mind about where this series goes at the end. Like anybody that knows and has been following the show knows me. I've been saying I want her to end up in this crazy theory of, what's his name? Quinlan Voss and Ventress, right? I kind of want that to happen, but that's really super far headcanon stuff. More realistically, now I'm thinking, well, what if, it turns out that Crosshair and Omega are the ones that survive, and they're the kind of, going on, leading whatever storytelling has to still take place around the Bad Batch. And I actually like that a lot more because we see the dynamic in this episode. We get to see the exchange, how they talk to one another. At one point when Crosshair says "too bad" to her, right? They're almost kind of being snippy with one another, and it reminds me a lot of like Have you ever seen? Do you remember the movie The Professional?
Right.
From like 1994, it had Natalie Portman's first role where she plays a little girl. And
Actually, just saw a clip from this on YouTube yesterday.
oh, did you really?
Out of like, it was recommended to me out of nowhere. It's so random.
Yeah, it's crazy what AI knows these days. But yeah, so like that not necessarily where it goes, where she suddenly becomes kind of like a hitman later on kind of thing, but just the dynamic of somebody who's kind of like this ruthless killer taking in this child who's kind of the better part of him, much better part of him, and just that dynamic as they go around the galaxy doing favors or work for, getting work for hire kind of stuff. That would be really interesting to see, or like a Star Wars version of The Professional in that sense. So I don't know. I mean, overall, that relationship and just getting to see more of that was really great. I do have some questions about Hunter and what he thinks about that. There was a moment, I think, in there where he kind of looked over at Crosshair and was kind of like, maybe this isn't a good influence kind of thing since he's changed, or maybe he's not changed. Yeah, all that is really, really intriguing stuff. So loved it.
But I did like that Hunter did step in to start defending Crosshair. So I think, to follow up from our conversation last week, it really does feel like Hunter, like Crosshair's back in the good graces of the team. There are no questions anymore about whether he's loyal to the team or if he's going to betray them. I think, and we kind of talked about this before, that once this show makes a decision on something, it's usually done in concrete and they don't walk it back, which I appreciate. And I think the episodes we saw yesterday and today, I think, are pretty much cement that as well for us, that we don't have to worry about this being a point of contention. Maybe with everybody else, I haven't come across them quite yet, but within the squad, it's not going to be a question anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's it. Let's get into our breakdown, and we'll of course start with at the very top, which I think, we got into some Star Wars politics, which is not always my favorite. I've said that so many times in the show, but it is interesting to see kind of what is some of the aftermath effects without getting heavily in. Like, we didn't go to the Senate, we didn't get to see all that going on. It was just really kind of like this under the table reunion between Senator Singh and Senator Chuchi. Oh, in some places of the world, that's not a good word. But yeah, getting to see them together, right? They were at one point enemies on different sides of the war, and now they're coming together and feeling like, okay, yeah, we kind of get what you were saying now, right? This doesn't really feel good, but of course it is a little bit different. But getting to see them kind of come back together. Seeing Rex and what was his name, GS8, seeing them. I think we haven't seen them since season 1, maybe.
Right.
GS8 and Sing we haven't seen since like season 1 or season 2, whatever it was. And then getting the shadow clone, which I don't know. There's a lot of names coming. I'm calling these operative clones, and I call the one at the very end Operative X. But I've seen Shadow Clone. I've seen some other names thrown out there. Operative Clone.
So I think the designations, I think the one who was attacking them attacking the centers, I think was CX7. And I believe the clone that hunts the other clone, it was CX2, I think is the actual designations for them.
The official name. Did they get that? Is that in the audio descriptions? Or CX2, is it the data pad?
CX2 definitely was, I think. Yeah. I can't remember what CX7. I may have picked that up when I was researching somewhere, but yeah, CX2 was definitely named though.
Okay. Yeah, we get to see Greer suddenly get taken out by the Shadow Clone. I'm not going to say the name. I'm going to screw them all up all freaking episode. And then just, them going after him, which I thought was great. Getting to see Rex and Hauser and eventually stunning him, which seemed kind of lame at first, like compared to the other guy. This other guy, you can't even touch him really. But this guy was like, oh, darn, I got hit with the stun blaster, but I guess it's from Hauser. So what do you expect?
Well, but he kind of thought he got away too, right? And Hauser was coming in and zeroed in. Now, it did take 3 shots to really take him out, though.
Sure.
So that was still pretty impressive. But I'm with you, though. I liked that we got Singh and Chuchi, I think, recapping a little bit of, the Clone Wars and early of this series, and saying that understanding the galaxy is changing and the perspectives that we had of being on the opposite side of the fence, the galaxy has to come together in some ways. And I think this was kind of good exposition and very brief, which I think was really important before we just kind of jumped into the rest of the story, to at least be able to say that these things are happening in back rooms. This is maybe not the rebellion of sorts, but this is the rest of the galaxy starting to, pull together and knowing that they're not so isolated and so alone. But what I really like from Senator Singh's perspective, though, is just, and I think this was prevalent in all of the material before this too with him, is that his first priority is really the people of Raxus, right? Mm-hmm. He really is into independence. That's his focus. That's what he really wants. It wasn't the separatist agenda or what the atrocities they were doing. It was more of like, we want to be able to control ourselves, have our own say, benefit in our own without the jurisdiction or the controlling nature of what the Republic represented. So I like that we still have some of that, and the rest of the galaxies, like you said, is kind of starting to get there a little bit, although we'll come full circle eventually, of course. But I like that we do get a little bit of that, and it helps us reintroduce them and gets the story kind of moving. Use familiar characters is always a little bit fun to see that too. And to know that Chuchi is back there still working these channels and trying to help clones and trying to help the galaxy is very true to her character. So it makes sense that that character was one that they would pick. And she's also rather unassuming in a lot of ways, right? So very petite and very, just can get behind scenes and get where she needs to be without a lot of attention.
Yeah. Do you think she's dropped the whole initiative to go like help the clones at this point? Because that was her MO, or what she was operating towards there during season 2. And there was no mention of it here. I mean, I guess things have changed drastically, and maybe it's more imperative now about bringing, coalescing these groups rather than going after the independence of clones, which apparently are all on Tantus now. So maybe they're not really all out there at this point.
Well, I think just by the way we see Rex's team growing, that could be an extension of the efforts from what the Senator's been doing, right? So I think in just their connection and being able, like, clearly they're in contact and communication. She's using Rex to help coordinate and protect and, bring people to them. So I think they're probably still very much working together, and they have similar agendas most of the time. It'd be curious to see if those directives have really changed or shifted at all, but I kind of led to believe, like, no, they're actually still very much helping one another out here. And it's this focus has moved to Tantus, but Chuchi has other things that she's accomplishing at the same time, especially as the Senate and the rumblings around Palpatine she was talking about seem to be, growing in some ways, or at least growing in pockets. So clearly a little bit of unrest and some rumors and some of those things starting to build up a little bit, even though we're still very early in the Empire days still. We're still really just, the first couple of years, right?
Yeah, definitely, and still in the early months here, or years, I should say. They find the puck on the Shadow Operative, and that puck not only had the face and information for Chuchi, but it also had the information for Omega. And so that was what gets Rex to say, okay, look, we need to contact that group because this is not going to end well. And I think they handed off to Fireball, which was, again, it was just like a reunion of sorts. There's so many names that were thrown in there back and forth. So now the next part, when they get to Teth and they get to the camp there, that was really good stuff because, confirmation that they had this, what do they call it? A suicide, what was that suicide capsule called? They gave it a name officially now. Oh, you remember?
No,
somebody throw it in the chat. Dale probably knows. Throw it in there. Whatever that thing was called, but it was neat that they gave it a name. They actually had that removed, and you can see him look like he just had all 4 of his wisdom teeth pulled with cotton still in his mouth. And we learned a couple things. So that happens. They wipe the identification numbers from all of these, which I think makes sense, right? They're really just kind of resetting them completely and removing any and all kind of identification of them, right? Just really blanking them out in that way. And Rex, for all his good, tries to get information from him. This guy doesn't give up anything, which I thought was pretty on point. You figured I was surprised. I would have been surprised had he said anything, honestly, given how much they've shown us of them already and how much we know about them.
Yeah, and they just keep their heads down and grunt and are quiet. And although he did perk a little bit up when we started talking about Tantus and whatnot, but that was about it. I'm with you. I'm glad that didn't work. But also we see the dissension a little bit between what Rex is doing and Hauser wanting to be a bit more, I don't know, use a bit more aggressive negotiations, if you will.
Yeah.
Someone made a Padme comment in the chat. So, but to do a little more aggressiveness and maybe, I mean, how far do you think Hauser would actually go towards torture of another clone?
Hauser probably, right? I don't think any clones
feel
above
right
it.
It doesn't feel right to say that, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, right, exactly. We don't want to say that, and I don't want to, I don't know.
We don't want that to be true, but.
Yeah, and I don't want to, it's just, there's so much individuality and personality in these guys. At some point, just on the numbers game, there's got to be one that's kind of okay with it. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably just a natural reaction. Plus everything that's happened to Hauser. Like,
exactly.
I can see where
that's where I was going to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a lot to be really upset about. And, I don't think he looks at them the same way that Rex does. Like, Rex is probably one of those more pure of light, pure of heart, because who did he follow? He followed Ahsoka. He followed the Jedi. He was much closer to them. And you got somebody like Hauser who was out on, on a Republic planet and was always in war, probably not with a lot of Jedi at his side, right? So, growing up differently, I can see where maybe he is into more aggressive negotiations or feels like, hey, why are we giving these guys even a chance? Look at what they're doing to us. This doesn't make any sense kind of thing. Right. So definitely not taking the high road there. But yeah, I mean, I could see that in him. He comes across as a more aggressive clone altogether. I mean, he was very confrontational with Crosshair. So yeah, I think for him, it's probably in character to want to do more. I don't know if he'd go into like actual extreme torture or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, knock him up a few, rough him up, try to get him to talk. Probably not a bad idea.
Right, exactly.
I'm sorry, Steph said having wisdom teeth taken out this week. Almost felt bad for the guy. Joshua Fraser says, does anyone here think that the clones in Phase 2 armor serving alongside Wolf are members of Wolfpack? Hold that question, because we're going to actually talk about Wolfpack and those at the very end here. So maybe hold the answer, I guess, for that, Jonesy. But I'd love to hear what people think in the comments here. Yeah, there you go. Electro Capsule is what it was called or something like that. But anyways, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out where I was here in the show notes.
Maybe while you look for that, maybe to go back a little bit to where at the very beginning of the episode, what did you think about Omega mirroring Crosshair, right? Because she was doing a lot of this with Hunter at the very beginning of the series, and we saw a little bit with with Tech and Wrecker and Echo in some ways, right? But we've never really seen her brood and pick her teeth with a toothpick and really mimic Crosshair. How did that make you feel, like seeing her imitate him in that kind of way?
Oh, I loved it. I think we talked about this when we saw it from Hunter during season 1.
Right. And
we may have touched on it in other glimpses where this has happened. She pulled off that Tech maneuver. Remember that? And that was kind of like, oh, we were waiting to see what kind of influence Tech would have on her. Of course, he had other influences and just, her technical expertise and abilities. But yeah, I think it's actually kind of natural, right? If you have kids, you understand this. Like, they pick up on these things. And this is what we said during the very first time. Kids pick up on this stuff and they imitate. They look up to adults, and not just parents. They look up to adults as models, and they want to imitate, whether it's verbally. Gosh, how many YouTube videos do you see out there where kids are just cursing up a storm? They have no idea what they're saying. They just heard it and they want to repeat it. Same thing that happens with behaviors and even just kind of your little habits. Kids just pick that stuff up. And, she's growing up with technically, or, somewhat a 4 or 5 brothers, mini brothers, if you will, all around her at all times. And so, yeah, she's naturally going to pick that stuff up. But I think it also says something a little bit more about her coming of age. Like, she's growing up, she's becoming more of a kind of a preteen kid, right? And that kind of angst, that little darker side, not necessarily darker side, but just the little bit more edgy that's coming in. So it's hormones maybe that's playing into it. And what better model for brooding, teenage brooding to take after than somebody like Crosshair. So it's probably some combination thereof, but I love the fact that in every season now, we've gotten little glimpses of her mimicking behavior from everybody. Even, we didn't even talk about, what's her name? The Trandoshan now. There was moments in there.
Yeah.
And then Fee as well. Like, I mean, she's going to do that as a kid, but I loved it, honestly.
Yeah,
what did you think?
Yeah, no, I do. I like that she's finding ways to connect with everyone around her, all the team around her, even Sid and Fee to an extent as well. Yeah, when she had her feet up on all of the different activities she had when they were doing the archaeological hunts last season and whatnot. So it just makes sense, and I like that. I like I didn't really put that together too much of her getting closer to that angsty years, if you will, and like you said, who better to emulate to work on your brooding and your slouching and everything else.
The coolness factor.
Yeah, the cool factor, right. Yeah, that's the one thing, like the rest of the team has been very disciplined, or they've been very technical or whatever it might be, but not that, right? Not Crosshair. Crosshair's like he's the rebel of the group, right?
Right. But yeah, definitely picked up on some of the rebellious side of her. So Rex orders them to go ahead and contact Hunter and Echo. We got to let them know that this is happening. And then, you mentioned at the very end there where Rex is like, oh, they've already asked him questions, and Hauser's like, yeah, but I haven't. Like, give me 5 minutes with him, Chief. I'll get some answers out of him, kind of thing. Anyways, we get back over to Tantus, and so the commandos the orders are recently activated now. At this point, they're heading out there. That we find out a little bit later. I'm going to throw this some out of order because we were kind of jumping back and forth between what was going on in Tantus and then back over to Bad Batch. So I've just kind of grouped some of this up together. But they were ordered now to neutralize the operative that's now kidnapped. We'll get into more about that here in just a little bit because there's still some kind of internal homing device that's still intact, which I thought was interesting. We flip over to the Remora 1, which is Echo's ship, and they're already on their way to the clone base at this point. And this is where Hunter asks Rex why they want them there so urgently. I wondered if, like, why wouldn't they just call him? Why did they actually have to bring him to the base? But, in the storytelling aspect, it makes sense. Got to bring him to the base.
Yeah, I mean,
Agreed?
That's what you do. Yeah, you got to get the team. You got to get the team back together, right? So, call them in. And I think once they know that something really crazy is going on with this operative and whatnot, it's a secure location. Let's just go ahead and bring them all in.
Yeah. When they get there, I think, again, probably one of two funny moments from Wrecker. The first one being like, oh, they're not happy to see us, just like old times.
Right.
And then
food.
with the regs. What's that?
And then food. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other one too, where it was food chow time. And who are the two that leave? Wrecker and the kid, right? Because that's usually how it goes.
And the dog. Yeah.
And the dog. Yeah, they all three take off. So some happy mouths to feed there. But it was great to see the Bad Batch meet up with, Rex and then Hauser. And then we get the confrontation between Crosshair and Hauser, which I thought was going to be, it was contentious. But, I wouldn't have put it past Crosshair for Hauser just to deck him.
Right.
It's a kid's show. So I get why he was more reserved and like, oh, you did some, I lost some men to you kind of thing. And I'm sure there was more to it than that. They were kind of pulling back there on that one.
Yeah. And I hate to skip forward too much into the next episode, but how do you feel about the resolution of like everything that Crosshair did in those episodes? And they kind of resolved it in a very, very high level, kind of loose way of Crosshair basically saying, loyalty is really important to me. The Empire didn't show that to me, so why would I be loyal to that? It wasn't anything about his squad or comparing and bringing some of that in. Did you feel like his reasoning is a little bit loose and limited in some ways? I feel like it's just missing a little something to where you actually feel like he, not that he's committed to the team, but it just that there's a certain, it's not just that the Empire discarded him and that was what was important to him. Is that I want the family part to come in, I guess is what I'm looking for. I just want the family part to just admit it, damn it. Just Crosshair, just admit it. You love your family and you want to be with them. It's okay that you're pissed at the Empire. I get that too. That's perfectly fine. But say you love your family, please.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. And this is kind of why I was complaining last episode, and I think you walked me off the ledge that, I'm kind of almost wanting an intervention of sorts, like a sit down circle.
Well, I'm dragging you back to the edge now.
Right back to the ledge.
Right.
So yeah, I think in that regard, I would agree. There probably needs to be more said and done for this. At the same time, it does feel expeditious in some ways, but at the same time, it's like we only got eight episodes left,
right?
And they can't dwell on it too long. We're just gonna have to kind of assume or take the benefit of the doubt that these guys are okay with it. They're still. I don't know that Crosshair. Well, first off, I don't know that Hauser's going to be a part of the main group going out and doing things. Maybe not. We'll talk about that now, given that Teth seems to be out of commission at this point, so maybe their base of operations is on Echo's ship there, or but more on that later. But yeah, if Hauser continues to be a part of it, I would expect them to still kind of be, him kind of tippy-toe around stuff, and maybe still having a little bit of contentious behavior towards him. I don't think it's fully resolved. I think if he's out of the picture and we just get Rex and we get Echo and we get the Bad Batch, we're probably not going to see a lot of it, because I think everybody there is probably okay. But definitely with Hauser, he came out and said, look, I lost half my men to you, right? We've got unfinished business. And I don't think what Crosshair has done, and certainly what Crosshair has said, is enough for Hauser to be like, especially since we just talked about how aggressive he is and kind of his behavior. I don't think that's enough for him to be able to kind of put, oh, okay, yeah, everything's cool. We'll get on and work as a team. It's probably still unresolved in a lot of ways there. Yeah,
and we'll talk a little bit more later on about what Hauser observes to change his perspective. But yeah, I think in general, I just like a little bit extra than it'll be because of how we treat Omega, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be just about Omega. It's got to be a little bit bigger than that in some ways. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes.
And as they're getting off there, Echo calls, it was kind of a weird out of place scene, maybe not, but he calls Omega back and is like, hey, got something for you, kid. Gives her a little hand crossbow, bowcaster, if you will. And that's pretty much it. And it's like, okay, well, we got to see her use it later on in the episode. I think they're signaling that this is something significant, or we'll see a lot more of it later on. But it's just interesting they threw that in there without kind of like an origin other than, hey, I've been around, I've seen a lot of things, and I come across things, so I thought I'd hand this over to you. And I don't remember now. I was thinking, was there an episode where we lost the bow that she had at one point? I thought she had that.
I'm assuming they lost it on
when she was taken captive.
Yeah, I think when everything fell and everything crashed and they were recovering, I think the crossbow may have been because she had it on. Maybe it was taken away from her when she was captured. Yeah, back on at Sid's place. Yeah, that seems right.
Sorry, in the chat versus CPU, surely foreshadowing at her training with Chewbacca. Yep, I like where you're going, buddy. That's the way I'm thinking too.
Yep.
But then it's a cool weapon. Don't get me wrong. I loved it, and that she got to use it was really great. It looks great. I got a lot of questions of its origin now, and who gave it.
It sure sticks out in the dark, though. I tell you,
that's true.
That light green shining in the bright, it just shines real bright, when you're trying to stay hidden.
Yeah, and then we already had, like you said, a darker episode, and there it is. She's just like this beacon of green light and hope. Shoot here, please, kind of thing. Let's see. Hunter mentions that their numbers are growing, right? You kind of look around, you can see a lot more. Well, we have really nothing to compare it to, but you see a lot more clones, or a lot of clones kind of walking around, which is really great. And then he says that Rex says they need to raid Tantus in order to save their brothers. Again, just more affirmation that this seems like where all this is going, right? That last episode sticking out like a sore thumb,
right?
What's it called? The Calvary episode. Sounds like that's probably what we're gonna culminate with here. Rex picks up the puck, and Hauser's got some really good questions here about, like, okay, well, wait a second, like, how are we trusting? How do we not know that this guy's like not a mole? Right? You guys just let him in.
Right.
And everybody seems to be okay with it, but Hunter actually sticks up for him. So again, Hunter, I think, is okay with it. I think he's put that past him, but Crosshair or I should say Hauser has every right to be very suspicious of him, especially, like, I can't believe even after all the explosions and everything went on, I would have been like, lock this dude up. Like, we've been fine up until now. He shows up and suddenly, even with the homing device that we've scanned and ruled out, I would have locked up Crosshair at that point and said, can't trust this. Well, they had other things to do, but I get it.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't he be tagged in the same way, even if he was defective? And I thought that was I like that he calls himself defective, and he's defective in the eyes of the Empire as well. And Hauser seems to kind of accept that a little bit, to just at least say that, all right, well, that makes sense why you were kicked out. Now, if he knew everything else that was going on and some of the, the maladies that he now has with his hand, and, and certainly Omega has seen some of that already too, he might have a different perspective on some of that, but at least for what the experiments were. But this information started to slowly come out, and, both Crosshair later on, as well as Omega here, stepping in and starting to share a little bit more about what was going on at Tantus. But I think they also have to give Crosshair a little bit of a break. He was locked up, right? And he was undergoing, experiments and everything else. So would you believe what he said? Would he be able to make sense of it either? I think also has to be, you have to be a little bit fair with that too, of like, okay, he was in a state where he wasn't maybe able to think clearly or remember things as clearly, even though he clearly has a very sharp memory and seems to be okay. But you could anticipate that some of that would be a side effect of whatever his experiences were.
Yeah. Josh came through, said the energy bow was captured by the Galactic Empire when she was taken to Tantus. So thank you for confirming that, Joshua. Music Train says Crosshair acting fatherly, even though he's younger than Omega. Yep. I love that continuing theme there. And then Dale says, I'm still convinced there's a 16th episode they're hiding from us. Boy, wouldn't that be a surprise? And what if they release that episode on May 4th or something, since it's kind of right up against May 4th. But I mean, that's crazy conspiracy theory right there, if you ask me. In that exchange, when so we got some, I was really kind of hoping we were going to get a lot more information when we had both Omega and Crosshair kind of giving us details on what was going on, exposition, if you will.
Right.
And we really didn't get anything new. It was just more of a kind of a repeat of everything that we had known. Omega talking about how, the M count thing. Rex was saying, I've kind of heard of that sort of, that might be where eventually now that we're going to lead into Ventress at some point. Maybe that's the path that we get there. And Omega saying we got to go back for the clones. I mean, you see Rex's eyes like lit up, like that was like red meat. Like he was like, yes, this kid gets it. We need to go back and get all the clones out of Tantus, which was really great. But for Crosshair's intel, not really anything new there. Just kind of talked about how they didn't have IDs. It's part of Hemlock's dark operative kind of thing. I don't remember if this is the point where. Or I think people have asked this many times too, like how did Crosshair not know how to get back to Tantus? He was definitely leaving and going on missions and doing stuff. I think people have a right to question that. And I think somebody like Hauser would be one that would be like, hey, wait a second, we can't, how do you not know how to get back to Tantus if you were there? And one of these guys, even if you were tested, we saw him doing things for the Empire at one point.
Do we know that he was at Tantus though?
No, he was never at Tantus. He was
right. He wasn't.
He was taken to Tantus after he betrayed after the Outpost episode.
But from their perspective, they wouldn't know because they would figure that was his home base. Okay,
yeah, like he was just working there and he got promoted, right? And of course, Crosshair does nothing to help kind of defend himself. He's not giving him any of that exposition. So I mean, yeah, why not? And of course, this is where Rex is like, we've got one captured. He's like, what? You have one captured? Like that's a bad deal. Like the Empire is going to be here at any moment. Now, the only question I have about this, and again, I'm not poking holes in this because I've enjoyed the episode, I've enjoyed the series. I just wonder, like, so many times in Star Wars, when somebody has a lead, they're like, send one person, send two people, like send the entire freaking Empire, right? If you, if you know, I mean, this potentially where this operative is, and the minute he called in, even let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. After he found that Omega was there. Like, why are you sending only two ships and one led by a clone who is, arguably probably not the best clone to have picked? Maybe he's the most loyal. I don't know. But I would have sent everything out there at that point, but they don't. So anyways, I'm not nitpicking, but it just feels weird that they wouldn't have sent more people or more reinforcements to go capture Omega if she was the most important thing. Two ships? It's not going to do it, buddy.
I mean, they had a decent contingent, I suppose, and they had two operatives. Well, one was maybe in captivity, but the other one was there too. So I'm with you, though. As many resources as they have available and how important she is, you send the flotilla, man. You send the whole house after the primary target.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Send them more. Josh says because he got their ship out, hyper jump to a random location, hard to tell where location is when you cannot find the court. No, and I agree. Like I'm not actually saying that. I'm fine with him not knowing. I'm saying from the perspective of everybody else, not knowing what he's done in the past, they should be asking this question.
Yeah, and he's not real forthcoming, so I get the mistrust there. It makes sense.
Yep. Okay, so then we get while this is going on, this dude is running amok. Like he's made his way all the way to the spire. He's got up to where all the landing pad is. He's setting explosives all over the place. No one's catching him, of course, which is fine. And this is where he finally, when he zooms in, sees Omega, and he goes back and calls Scorch and is like, hey, Omega's here. And they send the recovery strike team, and the orders are to take her alive. That becomes important a little bit later, especially when Wolf is involved, which I think speaks to his character and the good nature of him that still exists in him. But we'll talk about that here more in just a second.
What do you think about the design of his ship?
Oh, I loved it. I actually had in my notes here, like that ship is, I don't know. We speculated on the design of that ship back when the trailer was released.
Right. And
I'd said at the time that it almost had like an old Republic kind of look to it. It almost,
you know what it reminds me of?
What's that?
If you take the J-type Nubian that Amidala had in Phantom Menace, 25 years, right? Mm-hmm. If you just angle that thing out, it actually has the very similar structure to what the operative was flying here. If you take a look at it, it just kept jumping out to me. Like, what? Why does this look familiar? And it's just that conal kind of shape, and it just looked like the Nubian or whatever. So
yeah. I don't know. I don't know that we'll get the origin. It doesn't look Imperial to me, at least. Especially look at the other ships around in this era, both pre and post.
It kind of looks inquisitorious almost.
Yeah,
it reminds me more of like what the Inquisitors would have been flying around in, and their castle or whatever it was, in the Sanctum Inquisitorium or whatever it was called.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to get a lot of answers there, but
not until we get one of the books, for the
or the
ship
data
guide.
bank throws it in there or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So makes sense. So So Crosshair then says they need to leave. Again, we already mentioned this, but that operative's face kind of lights up when he sees him, which is interesting. And the operative then says that they should be asking Crosshair all the questions, and he calls him brother, which, I wasn't sure if he was being sincere or not. We got that line that we got from the trailer. I don't even remember what we speculated that line was from, but they are coming for all of you, which I thought was kind of creepy. Really liked it. And of course, all the explosions then happen outside of the base, and everything just blows up. And there's a lot of action here, which we're not going to get into. I thought for sure like somebody was going to bite it when everything kind of came down. I don't remember anybody dying here. Later on, I think we lose one of them, if I'm not mistaken, but.
Yeah, we didn't get any names, at least anybody that we lost. Because, they kind of made it look like we lost Rex, but we knew better than that. It looked like we lost the operative, but that didn't happen either. But there were a couple of no-name troopers that did seem to bite it, though.
Yep.
And even Hauser, Hauser gets shot in the shoulder, right? But it is not dead. He was just injured, but he seemed okay by the end of it.
This is also where, Nemec is the one that we lose a little bit later. Right. Operative X snipes I've been playing a lot of Fortnite lately, and it just reminds me of that game. But he gets sniped there while he's sitting there just taking a breather, I guess, right before all that happens, of course. Let's see. There's the moment there where, Rex comes in and he tries to take him out. Hauser comes in again. This is just the action step. Hauser picking up that flamethrower. That's like pretty gutsy and ballsy of him, but he ends charging with the flamethrower, gets shot. Drops flamethrower, that ignites the thermal detonators, and again, big explosions all over the place. And at the very end here, we get the 2 dropships coming out of hyperspace, which are all the reinforcements, the Strike Force. And like you said, like the big moment which I felt was appropriate. It was kind of a cliffhanger. I think anybody that didn't necessarily watch the Clone Wars or really didn't have an affinity or knowledge of who Wolf is was just kind of like, cool, I guess. It's another clone. But he's got so much history. Trust us on this, which I thought was I had this moment of like, oh my God, it's Wolf. Like we're finally going to get to see how all of this happens and all that. So I was pretty excited to see him. But his last line there of our orders are retrieve the target alive, and that becomes kind of again what the precedence of which I guess that contentious relationship that exists now, that is going to exist between Wolf and that operative, 2 sides of the same coin kind of thing is very interesting.
So why do you think they're sending a clone, to command and lead this, this troop, especially against other clones? Like, why do you think that is? Because I was trying to see how many clones were actually in this company. There were a lot of stormtroopers. There was a Republic commando. There was Wolf. Were there other clones in there as well? I think someone in the chat said there were other clones, but I'm trying to remember. I remember seeing a lot of stormtroopers though.
Yeah, there were a couple clones in there.
Okay.
If memory serves, not a lot, but it was kind of a hybrid group of folks.
Okay.
But to answer your question, boy, I don't know, because I've been struggling with this with myself. In fact, I have it at the very end, and it's fine. We can talk about it now, but I have it in my closing thoughts. Like, if you're going to send someone, again, you send more than 2 ships. You don't send somebody like him. Like, I can't, maybe Hemlock just doesn't have anyone else. But when I hear Palpatine saying, you have, anything you want from me at this point to get Omega back, and he sends this, like, that doesn't make sense. Now, from a storytelling perspective, it makes absolute sense, because at some point you got to introduce Wolf. And so then you take it from there and think, okay, why Wolf? Well, if there's anything that, again, I said this in my opening thoughts, if there's one character trait about Wolf that has been very consistent all the way back to the Clone Wars and even after the Clone Wars into Rebels, it's his loyalty. And I think if all you have is, if you've got a commander at this point and you need somebody to lead this group, why not put him in there? It opens up other questions, though. Like, again, we're getting into this now, but it's worth talking about. Like, how in the world has Wolf never been in a position at this point where he's doubted what the Empire's true needs are? Have they been just sending him on like courier missions where he's part of the recovery strike force. So I would assume he's been in some crap, right? He's not delivering mail or parcel packages of sorts. They don't have him pushing papers. He's out there on the front lines in wartime situations. So the fact that he's never been exposed to any of this stuff and seems to be completely coming into this with a lot of ignorance, but still blindly loyal to the Empire, it's just weird. It doesn't add up. But again, I'm not knocking it, because again, from a storytelling perspective, I love it. This is what I want to see. I want Wolf to be there, and I want him to finally come over and I want that to kind of all tie together with Rebels. But I don't have a really other good reason other than his loyalty. He's probably proven time and time again that he's a very loyal, no questions asked. He's not going to really butt up against the system in a lot of ways. He's just going to follow his orders like good soldiers do and do his job.
Yeah, and again, and Dale, our music trainer, rather just brought in the chat. We don't know if he has his chip or not, or if it's working, or if it's defective. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the reaction at the end. But what I liked about Wolf being here, and I don't have any answers either, but what I liked about what we saw with Wolf is that this is actually quite consistent with what we see in Rebels, with how we see that he doesn't necessarily, he's not always against the Empire, but he's like for duty, but also has a certain amount of loyalty, and there's clearly a connection and a respect for Rex. And I think that usually wins out in some way, and he's wanting to do what he think is the right thing, but he's going to trust others to kind of lead him to tell him what that right thing is in some ways. But so I think as you see where Wolf kind of goes this episode, especially at the very end, you do see a lot of similarities and familiarities with how even he behaves in Rebels and why he makes the decisions that he makes in Rebels. And I think it's cool to see that they kind of get embedded here and get this worked up. I'm curious if we'll actually see Wolf come back around and truly resolve this, or if this is going to happen some other time that maybe we don't. So I'm curious if we'll come back to Wolf at all this season. I kind of feeling we probably will. Again, it kind of makes sense, but if we're Storm and Tantus, maybe not. But anyway, I like that we at least get some of those moments though with Wolf, and that we're starting to build this character a little bit more and refamiliarize people with him that haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah, I'll try to come back to this question too about the chips, because I think that I got some questions around the chips now too, especially since we're seeing all these clones now and they all seem to be doing okay.
Yeah, they don't seem to really be working very well. So
I mean, you could argue there are no more Jedi, so that order is no longer. Maybe that order's expired. Again, we'll talk about that here if we got time at the very end. But
yeah, there's a lot to that, right?
There is. Sorry, Josh, I didn't mean to miss this one because I'm going to have to call it out because you called out the Old Republic. But he says the rangefinder clone assassin ship reminds me a lot of the Sith ships from the Old Republic era. That's what I think we said during the trailer breakdown.
Right.
I think it's almost got like if you've played the Old Republic and you know about the Rakata and the ships that they had, like the Starforge and that sort of thing, a similar design there as well. So they got to be pulling from that in some way. It's just too close of a look. But
right.
Okay, let's get into Extraction. And, this is where so this is where the operative, we find out he's alive. I had some confusion. I want to go back and watch it again. You and I were talking about this before we came on air. The way I interpreted one part in the scene, I get that he was trying to call his ship or at least call it up or do something, connect to his ship in some way. But there was a moment there where I felt like I saw him hurt and he did something on one of the buttons and suddenly he shook it off. And I thought, well, maybe could be cybernetic. Maybe it injected him with some kind of a stim capability that allows him to continue fighting. Really cool stuff if that's the case. If not, he could have just been calling his ship. But he's got a bit of a limp now. Definitely was hurt while that was all going on. And the Bad Batch are okay too. They all kind of come to, and at this point they're like, okay, we got to get out of here. I love that I think it was Rex that said there's always an alternative exit or something. And they move the little thing out of the way, the couch or whatever it is, and they head down through the middle. They talked about getting back to a leech vessel, which I think was the same one we saw in one of the other seasons. I forget which one now. Very similar design, if not. He mentions that there's not a hyperdrive, but at least there's a way to contact Echo. And so they're going to set up an extraction point, hence the title, and get Echo to swing by and extract them out. So kind of any thoughts on that opening sequence before we move into Wolf and company?
No, I think you summarized it nicely.
Okay. Let's get into talking about Wolf. So I think Wolf's consciousness is getting the better of him, right? He's already talking about how, these are clones, right? Yeah. I was told these were insurgents, and Operative X is like, well, they're both. And again, it's all from a certain point of view, right? It depends on how you look at it. But I think that was the first knock in the armor, or at least the doubt started to seep in of like, what am I doing here? Is this really the right thing? Like maybe he's never been sent on a mission where he's had to go extract or take out clones, right? In some way. But this is the first one because Rex has probably been going around and picking these guys up. But what did you think about that?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this speaks to, like, it's a question of like, what missions has Wolf actually been doing then, throughout these last couple of years, or has he not really faced clones, or has it always been from a distance in some kind of way? So it's a question of what are the clones, what's their role in the new military and the new army, and we know they've largely been decommissioned or shuttled over to Tantus for at whatever stage of their career, I guess, if you will, part of their retirement. But it is, that's why I was a little curious to see Wolf period, right? Or to see clones period. The Republic Commandos is another one, right? If those are clones, what's so unique and special about them? Have they been reconditioned or whatever it might be that is actually giving them that? But clearly Wolf has been either sidelined or been running other details that's not come across this. And they are isolating the clones from other clone confrontations, as well as maybe intentionally, preventing them from coming across and just making sure that they don't have any cross-pollination with potential insurgent clones. But also I think it speaks to the issue that the clones getting out of the Empire and finding Rex and Echo and others really is growing. Like there is a number of them, not just what we saw in this based on Teth, but in general, they are making some headway in that. Maybe they don't have thousands, but they are making some headway. So I think that they're seeing few of their brothers in the field makes sense. But you figure Wolf's got to be seeing a lot of things going on, though. But we just need his perspective to fill in some of the blanks.
Yeah. And this is where I think, both Wolf and this operative kind of get into, I mean, you can see where Wolf's leadership skills come in. Like he immediately takes charge of the situation. It's almost like the feds showing up and taking jurisdiction or taking over a crime scene, if you will. But basically he comes in and says, look, he immediately questions, like, what squad are you with? Right. So signaling that he has no idea when we talked about it, I think in the last episode, about just how secretive all of this, Project Necromancer and all of the operatives and all that dark stuff that's going on really is. Somebody like Wolf isn't aware of it. So that was number one. Wolf says that he's in charge now, right? That he's kind of running things from here on out. He orders everybody to set their blasters to stun. And, and then he tells, hey, we're going to split up. One team stay up here, block that entrance to make sure they don't come out. We'll go down to the bottom. He's familiar with the space, so we'll head to the bottom and cut them off there. And that's when that little sneaky guy gets away and goes down through the middle, which I thought was kind of effective. Like I would have expected him to do the same. He definitely didn't fall in line. And you got to think from the operative's perspective, although Wolf might come in and say he's in charge, he answers to a higher power, right? And so, yeah, whatever you say, buddy, but I'm still going to do what I need to do because, this mission, the mission's more critical for me. And I'm not going to say he wouldn't go against the orders of Dot to kill Omega, but everybody else is like fair game. We definitely saw that where somebody like Wolf would have ensured that everybody stayed stunned and not, shoot to kill kind of thing.
Yeah, he's not worried about casualties or collateral damage at all.
Exactly.
It's whatever's going to get the mission done. And, the Wolf had mentioned eventually that it's to bring her back in alive and unharmed. That wasn't actually what was the order at all. It was just to bring her back alive. So from the operative, in his defense, he was going to do that, whether she had all of her legs and arms, I guess. But, it would have been just fine, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, let's go to my Star Wars guy. Says, not sure why the Empire clones still wear the old armor. I would assume the Empire would want them all in the same updated TK armor. I just, I wonder too if it's kind of like they're meant to suffer. Everybody gets a new stuff, but those guys, don't worry about them. Their time is limited anyways, kind of thing.
Well, we kind of saw that on the Outpost too, right? It's more that the gear, the Empire doesn't respect the clones, and so they want that gear to continue to erode and be out of date, start to fall into disrepair, whatever else, to your point, and just making sure that they know that they're second class and they know that they're going to be phased out.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you have Wolf, who his gear seems to be in pretty good working order. Of course, nothing near as extreme as what we saw in the Outpost last season, but I think something like that though. But it was a little bit surprising to see it all still decked out and they didn't make him repaint it or something like that. But then again, we have to know who he is, and it's instantly recognizable. His is very unique.
Yeah, and we keep coming back to this, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but a lot of the decisions that people question in the animation especially are decisions that are made because it's animation, and it's decisions that are made because we have to be able to clue into something, and we can't do it in 22 minutes with exposition and dialogue. It's just, there's not enough time. So yeah, that's what happens.
Right.
Okay, so the Bad Batch are kind of making their way down to the little elite ship there towards the bottom. And this is where Operative X said suddenly he gets out to the kind of the middle of the spire, starts rappelling down, which I thought was pretty brilliant of him to do.
Right.
Crosshair, this is the first exchange with him. He says, hey, I'll take this and let everybody kind of go. And I think that was probably enough to give the guys some trust, right? Knowing that he wasn't going to try to backstab him kind of thing. But yeah, we got to see clearly that he's still not a good shot. But you know, the ingenuity is still there. The creativity is still there, which I really appreciated. Why not hit him with a proximity grenade of sorts or a shot, whatever that was? I don't need to hit you. I just got to blast you off that kind of wall. So good thinking on his part. And again, more action here, so we're not going to really do a whole lot here, but him falling down, the operative falling down, you know, he's like a cockroach this entire episode. Every time you think he's been shot, killed, dead, whatever, he comes back. He's able to grab onto that ledge and pull himself back over.
It really does make you wonder, like, what else have they enhanced these guys with? Because they take a beating and they take a licking and they just keep on going and
ticking.
Yeah, that fall that he had, and then to grab and not rip his arms out. I mean, yes, it's a cartoon, but at the same time, like, that's just not normal. And the falls that he took with the waterfalls at the end, I mean, there's got to be something else that they're pumping these guys with that's making them a bit more superhuman in some kind of ways, or extra human than just a normal. Which I don't want to discount the clones, because the clones are actually pretty exceptional, especially those like a Cody and a Rex and Wolf. And, you know, the commanders and the captains and all of that. But they're all really resourceful and they're all really capable. But this line of specialty troopers is just on another level.
Yeah, I love it. You know, hopefully we get to see more of them, and hopefully we get to see the bottom of who they are, and we get to understand, like, if they've been augmented in any way, and what are the things that, you know, what are the things has Hemlock done genetically to them to kind of do all that? Are they some kind of hybrid? Maybe they're, you know, like the Bad Batch in some way, not exactly, but, you know, defective clones that have been experimented post, you know, being created after they've been wiped, kind of thing.
Right.
This is where now the, you know, X is still alive. Operative X is still alive. They get to the ship, and I kind of saw this coming, but they get in the ship, they take off. This thing's not very fast. The engines are huge for big targets. And Operative X snipes them out, shoots the engines out. That thing crashes down. Of course, Wolf isn't happy with any of this, right? Because, I mean, he's right in that perspective. I mean, you don't go shoot down a ship when you have no way to ensure that the people on that ship are going to live. Thankfully, they did. But he tells them that he's now jeopardized his mission. And, you know, X responds back like, hey, I prevented them from escaping, right? Kind of thing, which is, yeah, I guess, you idiot. That's really not the message here, or the point.
It's the results that matter the most, Albert. That's, you have to remember.
Well, that is the Empire way.
Did you die? No. Then everything is
the Empire
fine.
way. No, it's the Empire.
Right.
Yeah, so they dispatch the shuttles and head out to the crash site. Okay, we come back to the Bad Batch, and of course, they're all alive. Everybody seemed to make it. They get out of their ship, and now they're heading through the jungle, trying to get to the extraction point so that Echo can pick them up. And this is where, before they take off, I thought, again, another really cool exchange, the professional moment, to call back to that movie, where Crosshair's checking in with her. He's like, do you have your crossbow? Do you have your backpack? You're right, making sure, you know, they're about to head out on a camp or hiking expedition. And, you know, Daddy Crosshair or Brother Crosshair is checking in on his daughter, sister, whatever it is, and is like, hey, just making sure that you're all here, kind of thing. So I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that he did that. And then Omega's response was even just as good, where she said, like, you're just like Hunter. Like, oh my, and he's like, oh, I'm much worse, kind of thing. So is he the overbearing, overprotective, helicoptering parent, whereas Hunter seems to be the more kind of, I don't know, hands off, let the kid do what he needs to, let him come, you know, figure things out on his own type of perspective. But it is very interesting that you've got two, I don't know if people are picking up on this, and maybe I'm just hypersensitive to it, but you've got two very different parenting styles that are in play right now between Crosshair and Hunter.
Yeah, it's turning into like my two dads now, of like which is the cool parent and which is the more strict parent, right? Of what's going to happen. And Hunter's got a lot more experience under his belt, right? With Omega that Crosshair's missed out on. So Crosshair's kind of catching up, and he's much earlier in that curve than where Hunter is. Hunter's kind of been there too, and he wanted to be very protective and make, you know, check in on her and be a little more overbearing. But, you know, Crosshair will get there, and he does trust her to an extent. He knows that she's capable. He's admitted as much. Yeah. You know, in the previous episode. So I think this is a good thing, and we'll see how this continues to evolve a little bit here. But I like the banter between them, though. Omega had so few lines in these two episodes, like so few lines. But, you know, this is one of the better ones with the, you know, a little bit of the complaining to her big little brother, I guess.
Yeah. So as they're moving on, you know, I think this is where we kind of get that moment of resolution in some ways, where Hauser's like, yeah, I noticed you're different, man. Like, you know, you're not the same dude I knew. Sorry, kind of thing. Okay, he wasn't that extreme, but he definitely acknowledges that something happened there. and he's questioning, why are you, what happened? And this is where Crosshair responds back that loyalty meant something to me, but with the Empire, excuse me, with the Empire, it didn't go both ways. I realized I was just how disposable I was.
And I recognized how much loyalty this little girl has to me, and I love her so much, and I just want to hug her.
No, I don't think he said all that, but
I think that was all implied, though.
I think it was implied, or maybe that was in the audio descriptions or something.
I think it was. It was probably in the foreign language I didn't understand. Yes.
Yeah. But Hauser, says, hey, you're not the only one, right? Acknowledging that, yeah, he felt very disposable as well,
right?
Given what happened to him during, I think it was season 1 now. They're all kind of coming together, so I forget. But, excuse me. So at this point, this is where Wolf orders a team to go back to the ship. He says to monitor the comms, and this leads them to the crash site at that point, which I don't know how that was so hard to find. I mean, it seems like they crashed just 500 feet away, and the smokestack was right there. But
it was very dark.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Let's see. And then this is where Hilo tells Wolf that X has gone rogue, so he's taken off once again, right?
Right.
Eventually, they find the Bad Batch, and this is where a whole lot of action's happening. Omega's kind of handing out detonators to everybody. Lots of shock, lots of fighting, lots of shooting going on. Really good. This is where he said, like, this episode, you called it, like, this episode had a lot of action, more action than I think than we're used to outside of, like, a season finale or something like that. But stuck in the midst of the middle of the season, I thought was great. X finally, this is where Crosshair takes out that shuttle before it tries to leave. And this is where we get the Wilhelm scream. This is also where X kills Nemec, who I don't remember him being in the Clone Wars, but maybe he was. There were so many freaking clones. I don't remember that guy, but either way, it was nice knowing you, Nemec, for what it was worth. And then he says, I'll draw their fire, get to the rendezvous. And this is where Omega says, I don't like that idea. He says, too bad.
Right.
Very nice little comedic moment there. And then we get into sniper combat. Before we get into all this, anything you want to add to, I know I'm kind of blitzing through the action, but anything else here?
No, I did like that we still do see Crosshair have some level of accuracy. We could maybe call it luck, but I mean, he pierced the cockpit right through the chest of the pilot, right? So he still has it in him in some ability there. And again, I'm with you, like the ingenuity.
53%, wasn't it?
Yeah, 50, right. 50,
57% or whatever.
And improving, I'm sure. But
yeah.
And again, it's more the ingenuity of just keeping at it and just continue to try and get a little bit better. But yeah, I do like that we're still seeing some of that from Crosshair. He's not giving up on it, and he's doing his best, even though you could tell he's really struggling.
Yeah. This next sequence I thought was the best sequence, honestly. And this is just between, I mean, it was such a character, a Crosshair spotlight episode. But then this part in particular where, you've got two snipers basically going at each other, that little, cat and mouse kind of thing, hide in, looking for each other. Again, very Fortnite, because that's on my mind right now. But then we get to, eventually they end up getting, locking up together. It turns into a knife fight. They end up going over this raging river. They go into the waterfall. And then when he pulls out the blades, there's that moment in there where he tells Crosshair, you had your chance to be one of us, right? Calling back to what we saw happen when he was first brought in there and they were experimenting, I guess we now know that's what they were trying to do to him, is convert him into one of these guys. And it didn't work because he's defective or for whatever reason.
Right.
But yeah, he nearly cuts Crosshair a few times. Like, I was thinking, like, whoa, Crosshair may not make it out of this battle the first time, because it was pretty one-sided.
It was
throughout
way
all
overmatched. Yeah.
Yeah. And this guy's already been beaten up too. So,
right.
What's that say about Crosshair? But he says you chose the wrong side. The blade falls down. And then this is where Crosshair just gets the snot beat out of him again, like multiple times over and over again, starts drowning him. And when he started drowning him, that's when I thought, oh man, that's it. Like, they're not, like, surely they're not going to show somebody being drowned on television, and that's the end of it. Or you see the bubbles, and maybe you see. All that went through my head, worried that we were going to see something like that. Thankfully, that didn't happen. As Hauser and company show up there. What are you thinking? Were you at any point, did you ever feel like he wasn't going to make it out of this episode?
I mean, there's a certain level of it, because you're right. I mean, he was completely overwhelmed and was not even really putting much of a fight up at all in this. Like, he was clearly outmatched. The younger model, the better trained model. I mean, he's just been slow.
The T-1000 versus the T-100.
Yeah, exactly. It was very much that. I mean, and again, you could tell he's rusty, right? He's not been in combat. I mean, he's been in some levels of combat, but nothing like this against a really highly trained hand-to-hand combat. It's probably been a while. He's been sitting in a cell for
He's
months
been in a
and
cell for
months.
6, muscle atrophy and lack of
Exactly.
skills.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it. So you can't really blame Crosshair, but it makes sense. And I'm glad they're doing that. But I also like about so I did have a little bit of concern, like, this can't be where he goes because this would just be anticlimactic. And if he's going to die, he's probably Omega's going to see it. But anyway, I think though, what I drew from this though was whenever he was starting to get drowned, is that I think he knew that his brothers, he had faith that his brothers was going to be there. The rest of the squad was going to show up. And so he gave in a little bit early to play dead, again, to try to convince him, of course, as well. But also knowing that the rest of the team wasn't going to leave him behind like they did on Camino or anywhere else. And that he had that faith in them to come back and help him out too. So I'd like to think that was going through his mind of that opportunity, whenever he was looking for options and really pretty much exhausted at that point.
Yeah, thankfully they were able to stun him. I guess when he went over the waterfall, I figured like, okay, that's a pretty far fall, and surely he won't survive that. But then I thought, you know what? He's probably survived it. I mean, he survived everything else.
Unless we see a body.
Unless we see the body, of course, which is the golden rule of Star Wars. So yeah, I mean, of course he lives, spoiler alert. But the Hauser pulls Crosshair back before he falls over into the water.
Not before they share a nod.
Yeah, they had that little nod there together.
Well, yeah, we're not quite saved yet. I'm like, stop nodding at me, pull me into shore, and then we can nod.
Yeah, we can nod later. Not right now, buddy. Okay, and let's jump to like the very end, right? And this is where, well, I guess we're already there, but just jumping ahead to where Wolf and company show up. That ship turned around. I mean, Echo was there, or that ship turned around. They got off there, which, by the way, I love the way they all pose before they get off. And then if you notice at the very last scene, they all got on the ship and turned towards the camera as the doors close. So
I thought the exact same thing.
Heroic pose before we get out of here, which is all good stuff. I love that stuff, but it is kind of silly at times. But yeah, the whole, it was interesting to hear the way Wolf said, Rex, like, what in the world? Like, you're the last person I would have expected because
you're dead.
You're dead. Right. Going back to that final episode or final season and episode of the Clone Wars, everybody has been, living with the notion that Rex didn't survive, that he was dead, buried somewhere out there. And then he says, don't tell me you're fighting us. And he goes, not, he said, and Rex responds back, no, not against you, against the Empire. They're imprisoning and experimenting our brothers. They've killed others. And Wolf responds back, the Empire wouldn't do that to us. So, like, again, we've kind of already talked about this and discussed it, but it does sound like either he's been living under a rock or he has just not been he's not being given the intel that he needs. It's like a need to know basis, and he is being relegated to doing simple tasks, or maybe he just doesn't ask questions, because that again feeds back into his loyalty, his soldier kind of persona.
Yeah, it's very similar to Crosshair, right? Crosshair had similar responses too of, hey, he was doing the whole good soldiers follow order things, but it had some similarities to it though too of, what are you talking about? This is what we're designed to do. The Republic became the Empire. So we serve the Empire now. They give the orders, we follow through with it, and everything is fine, right? And when we move on to the next mission, and we keep doing what we were bred to do, and you just see the similarities. And for whatever reason, he's not seeing the atrocities. But the other question is, like, you can see what's around you, right? Like, look around you. There are very few clones around you, a lot more stormtroopers, and they're pretty incompetent. So writing on the wall. But again, people don't know what's going on with the clones though either. They might hear little tidbits, but Tantus is very secretive. I think that was important to still establish that it's not that maybe he has his head in the sand, it's that the Empire's just been really good at keeping that information from them, and they don't have a reason to go look for any of it, right? At last they heard, they had the senators fighting for their rights to be, for retirement and stuff like that, and the Empire agreed, and they're working on it. So why would I question some of that? There's not as many of those rumors, I think, circulating quite yet. And Rex and his merry band haven't been able to get that message out either in any kind of way, because they just don't have any kind of organization to be able to do that, to spread propaganda within the Imperial ranks, I think.
Yeah. And he brings in, he calls on Omega as kind of a, respected witness, a credible witness, a material witness,
right?
Of like, hey, she knows. And she's like, yeah, it's true. It's what's been happening on Tantus. And Rex says, we have to stop them. You can help us. You can stand with us. I'm a soldier of the Empire. And then, he responds back, I'm a soldier of the Empire. I have my orders. Hand the girl over and I'll make sure you have a fair trial. Again, which speaks to
that was the eye roll moment. Yeah.
I know. It was like, yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, nobody's getting a fair trial with that guy at the lead up there. And he says, I know that's not who you are, kind of thing. So, and at the end, of course, and what I guess the most important thing at the end, Wolf does something pretty gutsy and pretty brave. It's almost out of character. And the only way he would do that is because it's Rex. Right. It speaks to the loyalty and the respect that the clones had for Rex. Because had it been anybody else, I don't know that he would have done this I don't know that he would have said, lower your weapons and we're letting them go kind of thing. Right. I mean, that's just, and I got questions and I don't want to talk about it now here, but just at the very end, kind of one of my final questions is just like, what happens to Wolf at this point? Because it can't be good. Like there's no good path for him.
Yeah.
Once
court-martialed. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess your thoughts on the loyalty there or anything else on that final episode, final scene here.
Yeah. It was when he was going through it, when Rex was walking through all this, it's like, how is he actually going to convince him? And then he said, she's a child. The Empire is hunting a child. Like, how much sense does that make? That's just wrong. And telling him that's not who you are, like he said, I think that was really what maybe got through to him. Like, okay, why do they want a kid? And why are they expending so many resources to get a kid? That just something just doesn't smell right. We never did this, right? In the Republic, we never had a reason to go after these, young people like this. But, maybe he's seen other examples where he's starting to put pieces together. But I think it's moments like that where Rex is able to get through to him and just give him that one example, and he can see with his own eyes that, okay, wow, yeah, she's like 10. Like, why are we, what sense does this make? How important could a child be to the Empire to do all of this and to have to kill our brothers and to kill and waste resources and everybody else? This something just doesn't feel right. But it was really strange though that he told his squad to stand down, B, that they did it, and then C, that they all just were like, okay, cool, let's go home. And there was no conversation about, bro, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like you have just signed all of our death warrants. Mm-hmm. Like we're all cooked. Like this is not going to end well for any of us. That was a little bit of the surprising part, was just they were just like, okay. And everybody was just not even looking at each other or anything like that. It was maybe a little bit of a weaker moment in the episode, I think, of like trying to understand. And maybe I'm not patient enough. Maybe next week we'll see some of the aftermath, or in a coming episode, we'll see some of the aftermath that will help us reconcile some of these feelings we leave this episode with.
I wonder too, if maybe, we've talked a lot about Wolf's loyalty, and, maybe that's trickled down. Maybe that's had an impact on his group, and, whatever he says, he's made good judgment calls in the past. They may be very loyal to him because he's shown loyalty as well, and, respect and loyalty to them. Like that seems very much in character of Wolf. So again, I'm not trying to gloss over anything or shine anything that doesn't need to be shined. But it could be that. It could just be the fact that, they saw him as, okay, well, he's our commander and he's made good calls before. I'm sure we'll be fine. I'm sure we'll all get a fair trial kind of thing. And so, they fell in line with it. But
yeah, and Stephanie in the chat had, of course they didn't argue, good soldiers follow orders. I think it's more with the stormtroopers. We've seen, and maybe I'm just playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. I'm not arguing or anything. Well, we have seen the dissonance and the willingness of the stormtroopers to push back on the old timers, the clones, and being outdated and being a relic of the past, right? Mm-hmm. And not really being too bashful about that. So it was a little interesting not to have any kind of dialogue, or there wasn't one of them that would come and step up and start to argue and push the point a little bit. But again, it could be something like you said, that Wolf has stuck his neck out for them and has a lot of loyalty. I think with the commando, some of that might make some sense, although the commando is still very confusing to me about what's actually going on with all the commandos and Scorch and company. But there's something there. I hope we get a little bit more to help us understand why that was. I'm not holding my breath for that, but we definitely need to see what the aftermath to this is.
No, you bring up a good point. Contempt was the word that I would use.
Yeah, that's a good one.
How the stormtroopers have reacted to the clones just in general. We saw it in season 1 and season 2. The other thing that kind of plays into this as well, I think at least from Wolf's perspective on this really doesn't feel right at all. When that ship lands and Echo and Gregor walk out, I mean, he's got to be thinking, what in the world? Like, I got Echo, Gregor, Rex, Hauser.
Yeah.
I mean, and then, with the Bad Batch, like, what the hell's going on here? Like, this is not adding up. Something's
That's a
definitely
fantastic point. Yeah. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming of like, how can all of these people, some of which I greatly respect,
wrong.
make this decision? What am I missing? Like, what am I in the confusion? So I'm with you. I think that was a fantastic thing to pull up and to, kind of bring forward. Cause I think when he sees that, you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, we were all on the same side and now you're all over there. And I've got to bring you all in. Like, something's just weird.
Yeah. Right. This is, of course they give the little nods again to each other. Like,
Right.
Yeah, we'll see you later kind of thing. And they head up and leave. Now, a very cool moment, Rex orders them to pick up their fallen. And I think I don't remember if it was the commando or whoever it was like, sir, they're traitors. And he's like, perhaps, but they're clones. We owe them that, right? That loyalty is there. His loyalty to the clones, that respect for the clones. Not what we saw in the Outpost, right? We had that scene in the last episode where, Crosshair put all the helmets back up, but definitely still something alive and burning well there within Wolf.
Yeah, it was nice to see that. That was a really good, that was a surprising comment. Actually, we hadn't heard a lot of that throughout the entire series, really, because they're not often able to go back for their dead or find them, right? I think with Tech, they would have loved to have recovered him and, done something more formally with him. But I think it was nice of Wolf of still respecting that, and the ones around him also going to follow that order and do it. Now, what they're going to do with those bodies, I really don't know, because if they bring them back to the Empire, that's probably just going to get thrown in the incinerator or something like that. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm laughing at Steph's comment. Echo ship landing so nonchalantly without coming in guns blazing when they see that there's an Empire ship facing off with their companions was the least believable thing in the episode for me.
She's absolutely right. I think the whole scene was very slow and methodical.
But it was framed beautifully. Like, it looked amazing. Everybody was.
But it was also like totally impractical of all of the Imperials are just going to sit there and watch this ship land and like do nothing. All these people are going to get off it. They're not going to do nothing. Not going to do anything. That's a double negative. Not going to do anything. They're going to talk and they're going to argue, but they're not going to do anything. It was like, I've never seen the Empire so complacent in something in my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember like a time where they've just literally sat there and no one pulled the trigger or no one, pushed back or argued or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to have to chalk it up to just blind loyalty to Wolf there.
We'll go with that. Yeah.
But again, it looked great. Again, we're not knocking the show. Like, these were great episodes and we love this stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Back on the Remora one, we get the final scene, which is, Rex telling, he's saying, I'm sorry about your men, the men that Rex lost and throughout all of this. Certainly they lost their base at this point too. And Rex makes the point that, look, we're going to keep losing brothers until we get them, get to Tantus and free them. Hunter tells him, like, we can't do that. There's no way. The Empire's too strong.
Right.
Sounds like they're going to need some Jedi, if you ask me. But then Rex Omega, yeah. But yeah, so and then we're kind of left with Rex throwing this little trail of breadcrumbs out there, or a little feeler about, hey, you're never going to be able to get to the bottom of this until you understand why they were after Omega. Like, that suddenly is important. And in some ways, I guess it makes sense. In some ways it doesn't. For the story, it definitely makes sense because we need somewhere to go at this point, because I don't know, they really don't have much to do other than go back to Pabu. I'm trying to think, like, where would they go? Maybe Rex has other bases of operation that they could land somewhere, but I think we've seen from the trailer at some point we got to get back to Pabu, and we got to see the Empire show up. So, that's probably more likely where they go here. But what do you think?
Yeah, it seems like, that's kind of their home base. That's where they go to relax and rest and, feel hidden and feel safe, I think. So it would make sense that that's where they go. But yeah, I think the comments from Rex are really interesting because I think, yeah, it's important to always know why you're being chased or what's so valuable. But at the same time, if she has a high midichlorian count, what are they going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
They're already going to protect her with their lives. So how relevant is that information? Unless, to your point, maybe, of, okay, we need some specialized help, and maybe Rex knows somebody, or they could put feelers out there, and maybe this is how we get introduced to Asajj Ventress or something like that. So we'll have to see where these next few episodes go, of what this quest for Hunter looks like. But yeah, it was very much Rex charging Hunter with this task and with this duty now. It's like, here's your quest, you know, do you accept? Well, you don't have a choice. I'm telling you, you're accepting.
Yeah. I think that's probably I think you're right. Like, I mean, that's kind of what I'm envisioning too. They're going to have questions, because even Rex said, like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar with it. I've heard the term, but that's not his level of expertise, right? Plus, a lot of time has passed now. So yeah, maybe, you know, I would assume he has a way to contact at least Ahsoka. And maybe she's like, oh, well, I can't help you, but I'm sending somebody who can. Or if you head out here, you find someone that can help you, right? And maybe that's where they come up on her, and that's why she attacks them or defends herself, you know, initially when they, you know, during the trailer scene that we got. But I would think they're going to want to know something more about midichlorians and try to get somebody to kind of explain that, or explain the need, or how the importance of Omega and what that really truly means in the grand scheme of things. Because you're right, to this point, they're not going to do anything differently, right? But that could be the difference between, oh, let's go find a place where we can settle and stay hidden, versus, no, we'll never be able to stay hidden. We've got to always be on the run, kind of thing, right? So I think that's kind of the logical step in which we go. So hopefully we get Ventress and maybe Quinlan Voss in the next episode, but I wouldn't hate it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, and to your point, I think when you learn M count, and if you learn more about what midichlorians are and what that might mean, then you have to somehow bridge that to the Emperor, right? Or of course, the clones might equate this to, they're trying to create some sort of special Jedi or dark Jedi army or something to that effect, you know, with all of the amazing things that they were able to do. Maybe they'll make those connections, but, you know, they'd have to really start to peel back a lot of layers to actually truly uncover the Emperor's end game. And I have a feeling, I think that's going to remain hidden. I think, and we speculated a little bit this on the final hype show of whether we would actually learn everything about Project Necromancer, or see it like our characters or our heroes come in there and actually understand what it is and willfully destroy things. And I think I'm becoming more and more firm in my position that I think they will set back the program, but they'll do it without having all of the information, without having all the facts, because I just think it would just make sense for that to be the case, especially what we see later on in later years of content, to where this is still very much a secret. So even if they get set back, I would think that it would still going to be very much intentionally done, but from an accidental, like how much impact did they really have of what they were trying to, you know, to prevent from happening. They may not know the whole story and really know how important that effort was.
So do you think at this point we're going to have Rex and Echo with us the rest of the season? Do you think that's the case? I mean, 8 episodes left. Do you see the situation there, or do you think they go back and do their own thing and suddenly the Bad Batch is off doing their own thing? Or do you think it's just a temporary thing? Like, you're saying a lot of things here, but maybe it's a temporary situation where they go off and try to find the answers. Rex does what he needs to do, and eventually they come back to Rex and they realize, holy bananas, not only do we need to get everybody out of Tantus, but we got to shut this place down because we can't allow, you know, whatever they're trying to do, whatever they find out.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to the episode that you're fixated on with the cavalry arriving, right? And I think it goes back to, we probably separate again, right? So we get them back to the Marauder, because we know they're flying around an Echo ship right now, but I think they probably do separate. I think they do go their own ways. They have their own missions. They think things that they need to figure out. I think the squad still needs to kind of figure out how they work together with Crosshair and whatever else goes on there. But I think that they probably do separate, and they'll come back a little bit later in the season. Of course they will, because that's how we end the series, right, properly. But I think that we'll probably break apart here. We may not see Echo and Rex for maybe not until those last, you know, 2 or 3 episodes or something like that. We may actually take a break from them after having them for a couple in a row. Or I guess really Echo, we've had what, three so far this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What about the chips? Like, what do you think? Like, I threw this question out there, at least someone brought it up as well. I don't know what's going on with the chips now. You know, I think we've theorized a number of things already about how the chips work, but it's pretty clear, at least to me, that there is some kind of I don't know, maybe like, what's the word I'm looking for? Diminishing returns, if you will. Like over time, the half-life of this thing, the effectiveness of it starts to wear off. It could be just something with time, age. It could be that there are no Jedi, so technically that order is kind of null and void at this point. But it doesn't feel like they're being inhibited. And then we also got to remember too that when we get to Rebels, they talk about having their chips removed. And I don't know, did Wolf get his chip removed already? Is that something that he's going to do? I mean, if they removed it, then I would assume there's a way for them to kind of make them do other things, right? Force them into other orders. And so that's what leads all these clones eventually to pull the chips out of their heads. And maybe that happens, we get some kind of epilogue moment, during the last episode where we get to see not necessarily them removing chips, but them coming out one by one after having their chips removed, somewhere safe on Pabu or wherever they've decided to land. But either way, I think the question stands about whether or not the chips are effective at this point, because it just doesn't feel like they are. It feels like they're back to their individuality. They're no longer being controlled. But what are your thoughts there on that?
Yeah, they don't seem like they're mindless zombies like
Yeah.
what we had initially as well, right? Especially with what we saw at the end of the Clone Wars. So I'm with you. I mean, we haven't talked about chips in a long time, like in an official capacity within the series. No one's brought it up. And that's a little surprising. But again, I think I'm with you. I think this is probably less effectiveness, right? The chips, either they're wearing out, they serve their purpose, and things are kind of going on a little bit longer maybe than they anticipated. It doesn't seem like the clones were maybe the long-term answer for the Empire anyway, or I mean, clearly they started shifting away once they started finding defects in them, and the chips weren't as effective as they wanted, or they started failing a little bit early, and then they started to question orders a little bit later on. So I think it's just more of they're wearing off, but it goes back to like even these operatives, right? With how are they reconditioning them if the chip is not as effective as it was? And with Crosshair, we still have a lot of questions about whether or not the chip got burned out when he burned his head, right? And was that what did it? He always claimed that he didn't have it anyway, but we've really not had anything definitive there, I don't think. So it's a matter of how is reconditioning working too? Is it part of the chip's effectiveness is still there, and so they're able to really embed these, or are they doing other experiments that seem to be working around the chip and doing something similar in that regard to where they just completely erase everything about them? So clearly it's more at play than just a chip, but I'm with you though. We haven't talked about chips in a long time, and I don't mean we Cantina Cast. I just mean we as a series.
Yeah.
And so it's curious that we're not revisiting that with some of these, especially we're talking about loyalty and whatnot. But I think at some point we've got to come back and talk to it about why clones are, how they're able to maybe buck the system a little bit here and get out of this and get a little bit of a clear definition as to what's actually happening and to have us. We know that Rex, even if we remember back to the last season of the Clone Wars, we had Rex who didn't want to do the things he was going to do to Ahsoka, but he still did them, right? He was still going to shoot her. So we know that they don't necessarily lose all ability to do things, but they willfully, they have to follow because they have a choice.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting to figure out if we'll actually get a clear response here definitively one way or the other. Because I think after this series, where else are we going to have that opportunity to really do that? It's not clear how we would ever have those questions answered. And I think these are important ones to have some, find some final closure around the chips, I think would be a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm looking ahead to the episodes. All right, so just looking ahead, we'll end on this note, but we've got Bad Territory and Harbinger, which I'm going to guess are kind of back-to-back episodes, probably in the same boat. We had speculated that Harbinger was likely going to be the Asajj Ventress episode.
Right.
That seems to track, I think, at this point, given the trajectory of what we're looking at here. So maybe Bad Territory is wherever they're going now to go find them. Harbinger is when they meet. I can see the cliffhanger being at the end of Bad Territory. Asajj, that whole moment kind of thing where she deflects the bolts. We have to wait a week to kind of see now what happens, and that happens in the Harbinger episode, right?
Right.
But then we get into a back-to-back episode called Identity Crisis. That could be the chip episode, and Point of No Return. And the reason I say, I was thinking about it now, it probably makes more sense for them to get the chips out of their heads if they've not done so already, but before they go attack Tantus, like before they go balls in on the Tantus, they probably got to get the chips removed, right? So I would assume that maybe that's where it's going to happen, somewhere in that back tip. And that's a 2-part episode. That'll be on April 3rd that we'll get both of those episodes. So it's another 2-parter. So I'm thinking if that seems to be where it's going to be at, because after that, we've only got 4 episodes left. We've got Juggernaut, Into the Breach, Flash Strike, and then the Cavalry has arrived, which I think we're all speculating now being that the infiltration, if you will, the extraction, if you will, of Tantus and all the clones there. But what do you think?
I think it's as good a guess as any. I mean, it seems to make sense. And you could actually almost equate a Asajj Ventress 3-story arc, like with Harbinger and then with the back-to-back, Those could talk a little bit about her as well, right?
Yeah, that's
Maybe.
true too.
That would be a lot of episodes dedicated to one, with one character being in the mix. So that might be a bit of a stretch, but that would be kind of fun. It'd be nice to see Asajj Adventures get more than just a one episode or a end of one and a full episode. But
Yeah.
that wouldn't that's not really the MO though.
Yep. Do you guys know Star Wars Explained, Alex Molly? Yes. Would it be cool to see you guys collab? Two of my top Star Wars channels, in my opinion. Thank you so much for that, Trent. We've met them at Celebration a couple times now. There's usually a podcast, a podcast night
Meetup.
where all the podcasts meet up, and we all get together and go around, say hello, and we see each other all the time on social media. We just never talk, of course, but because we're all busy. But that's the times that we've had a chance to meet and talk with them. So great people. We definitely love those guys. Okay, well, let's leave it there. I mean, we got the Patreon episode coming up this Sunday, so we'll probably pick up on some additional things that we've got here, dig into this a little bit more. But overall, again, banger episodes. This was pretty, if you're a Clone Wars fan, this series is really doing it for you, right? But these two episodes in particular were so heavily steeped in Clone Wars mythology, the names, a lot of the mythos of what's been going on, really good stuff there. And it really kind of leaves us, in a lot of ways, leaves us with a now what scenario, given we really don't know what they can do at this point or where they're going to go. At the same time, given the trailer and just our own speculation and headcanon, the possibilities are pretty exciting. So,
yeah, we did have one more question in the chat that just came in from One Up versus CPU. Is the base Rex is at an old Hutt palace?
I think it's a Bomar palace, I think is what was been established. Remember, Jabba the Hutt's palace was originally a Bomark monastery.
Right.
And those are the dudes that would take their brains out, stick them in the spider jars. We saw them kind of crawling around there, I think, in Jedi. There's a whole thing on Bomar monks, super fascinating, super creepy. But Jabba actually took that palace over from the Bomark monks. I think in Legends, he was kind of like leasing the place for a while, and then he finally just took it over from them and locked them up in the bottom of the dungeon, and they were kind of relegated to just walking around. But yeah, I think it's similar. I think I don't remember where it might have been in the Clone Wars movie that they said that was a Bomark, what do you call it? Temple of sorts?
Yeah. Monastery was the right word.
Monastery. Thank you.
Yeah. Cause you remember we went to Teth back in the original Clone Wars movie, which I was watching some of the animation. I was like, oh wow, this was really different back then. Like it's really improved a lot, but yeah, this is where we see a lot of these things and we get the Bomar monasteries. So that's where they all come from. And that's that common design. So they're spread throughout Teth. We see them on Tatooine. They got them on other planets as well.
Yeah. Those guys are creepy. Go read the Wikipedia entry on the Bomark monks.
Yeah. You know who's not creepy, Albert?
Who's not creepy?
Our amazing people in the live stream, just like Trent and One Up versus CPU. So thank you for everyone for coming out. CantinaCast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much. You could be one of these amazing people. Kathy Qui-Gon J, Sky, My Star Wars Guys, Steph, One Up versus CPU, Joshua, Music Train, Alex, Trent, Riley, Angelina just popped in the chat as well. So thank you, everyone. Anyone that was in the background watching tonight, we certainly appreciate that. If you like this video, please do feel free to give it a like. If you're not subscribed, we would love to have you subscribe so you can join us each Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central Time, center of the universe, apparently. I'm all right with that. It makes it easier to remember. Who needs that GMT stuff? We don't need that, or universal time. None of that stuff. That doesn't matter. But we appreciate you coming out. And if you want to leave us a comment, let us know what your favorite part of the episode is. Where do you think we're going next? Are we going to the Asajj Ventress episodes? What do you think about the operatives? Is there anything special about there? If you say that it's tech, I will lose my mind.
It's not tech. It's not. I mean, I'd love you guys for thinking it is, but come on. It's not.
He's
they
dead.
Do that.
That would be
cruel and unusual punishment for no reason. That would
be very cruel and unusual.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. But hey, if you have other additional questions, throw them down in the comment section, and we will definitely answer them there. Be more than happy to do that. So thank you for that. Again, programming note before we get out of, just remember this Sunday, 9 p.m. Central, I'll be on to do Waystation. So that's our Star Wars news and rumors and gossip and everything in between show. We'll do that with Fred and Ed. Fred's going to be joining us again. He's been on shows before, but it's going to be those two guys. Their dynamic is going to be very interesting. So I don't know what to expect. Who knows? And then right after that, 10 p.m. Central, Jonesy and I will be back to do our Patreon episode. All right. Before we get out of here, any final thoughts, words, comments from you, Mr. Jonesy?
Nope. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. We'll see y'all here in just a few days.
still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.